Welcome back to Health Challenge Delaware Week 2. If this is your first week, you are most welcome. It's all fluid. You just join when the mood strikes. I guess we don't have everybody muted. Alex, I don't know if you're able to mute all or.
I don't have the capability to do that.
Second. We got a lot of sound. Everybody mute yourselves. Participants. Mute all here. Done. Okay, sorry about that. So get a new index card, and we've got a week 2 survey. I'll have a little time to fill this out. Some of you have already done it. Thanks a million. These surveys are really helping me. I'm getting feedback from you guys. I read every single submission today, and I was really excited to get those submissions. People are actually getting some value out of this. We're making some changes. I'm really encouraged. So today we're going to really focus on food. We talked about food a little bit last time. Here we are, week 2 out of 4. And again, we do have this monthly ongoing first Tuesday of the month at 6:30. We will continue this. So you are most welcome to keep coming on back. Support is a good thing. Agenda, Food 2.0, again, for those first 40 minutes or so until about 7:10. We have another 30 minutes discussion for about 10 minutes and also filling out our survey. Breakout rooms is when we're going to build our new action plan, or we're going to share what we've achieved so far and kind of refine it, tweak it, or maybe keep the exact same action plan. And then your final questions. So I've gotten a lot of good feedback from the mentors that things are going really well. You guys are doing great. Everybody seems to be getting time to talk. And that's one of the things we want to make sure happens. Everybody has the ability to speak and no one person dominates the whole conversation. And otherwise keep mute right now if you could while we do the presentation. Reminders, I'm going to review a couple of highlights from last week. I want everybody to remember there is no guilt or shame. There is no right or wrong. It's really what you're able to do. Have an experimental, curious mindset as we go through this. Let's see what works. Let's see what works with this test subject I have myself. Did that change work? Was that too much for me? Back off if things didn't work out the first week and try to change and just try to keep moving forward. Safety, I just want to mention, because it is important. If you make a very big dietary change or a lifestyle change, there is the potential of running into trouble, especially if you're on medications that'll lower your blood pressure or blood sugar at the same time. Warfarin is a particular blood thinner that we don't use very much anymore, and it's very seldom an issue. But if you were to suddenly eat a whole bunch of leafy greens, you're boosting your vitamin K intake, and that will interfere with your warfarin. And keep in mind about the vitamin B12. We do recommend, if you're going to eat plant-based, and even if you're not eating plant-based, get a good amount of vitamin B12 a day, about 1,000 micrograms a day. And be sure to check in, keep tabs with your provider, especially if you're having anything unusual going on. I am here and your mentor is here, but if it's a medical thing, please reach out to your provider. So last week we climbed this pyramid of health, and we talked about all the different sort of dimensions of health and all the different categories. And really any of these is fair game for creating your own action in your action plan around. You have to figure out for yourself, where are the areas where you need the most help and where it's going to be the most impactful and where you're the most ready to make a change. And that's what building this personalized action plan is all about. So here are the main categories, the exercise, the movement, the food, the relationships, the sleep, and the mindfulness. We built this index card full of our action plan. And hopefully by the end of the week, we've checked off we've check marks. And I see that most people were getting more than 2 a week, but whatever you get is great. But we want to identify how many days of the week were you successful at doing that action. So this week we've got a new index card, and we're going to fill that one out with our week 2 plan. Again, it could be a piece of paper or even a Post-it note, whatever format you want. This week, it could be the same as last week, if you like, identical plan. And the goal would be to just get more check marks, and that's totally fine. this week we are going to give you a lot of new tools with regard to food, hopefully that you find helpful and maybe find a little more inspired to try a food-based or be a little more aggressive with the dietary changes, because as we shared and as we'll share more today, it is a really important dimension of health. We shared what are the 5 food groups, and these are basically the food groups that we recommend you eat almost exclusively. We have the legumes, we have the starches, the grains, rather, whole and intact grains. We have the fruits and vegetables, and we have the nuts and seeds. It occurs to me there's one thing missing. There's probably a couple things missing. One thing that is missing from here is mushrooms. They don't fit into any of these categories. It's not a vegetable. It's got its own whole kingdom, the fungi, but I digress. And of course, I show this slide way too much, but I just think it really captures the whole message. And keep in mind that if you suffer or you know someone suffering from one of these diseases, which is pretty much name a disease that anybody's ever heard of, and it's on this, I shouldn't say 100%, but a whole lot of diseases are on this list of reversible with a healthier diet. We heard a little bit of report back that some folks are already getting some benefit after just 3 weeks of making dietary change toward more whole plant foods. And yes, those cholesterol levels definitely come down. We shared this, which is a really powerful study called the Global Burden of Disease Survey from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that really tried to do an in-depth analysis looking at massive amount of published research to determine what are the leading contributors to early death and disability. And what they find is that the dietary risks really contribute to 5 of the top 7 causes. And diet is overwhelmingly what's causing death and disability, not only in this country, but worldwide. I'll highlight total air pollution being not diet related directly, although animal agriculture is a major polluter. So I could even have drawn a line over here to total air pollution. And that's something emerging. We probably won't have time for it, but PM 2.5, watch out for it. It is far and away the most toxic element of air pollution, causing the most death and disability. So you can watch your daily air quality reports. And of course, tobacco is on the list, but it's way down at number 3 now. So what is it though? So let's get into some new territory. What is it about the foods that we are eating that causes the trouble? Is it the fat? Is it the sugar? Is it the artificial chemicals? What is it? The preservatives? Well, the same Global Burden of Disease Survey attempted to answer that question. And what they did is that, surprisingly, what they found is that the top 2 causes of death and disability, kind of tied, are 2 things you wouldn't have expected. It's the sodium. It's the sodium in the standard American diet that seems to be the number 1 contributor to the dietary causes of death. And it is the lack of whole grains that is the number 1 dietary contributor to dietary causes of disability. So whole grains and sodium, they're 1 and 2. Surprisingly, you might have thought it would be vegetables. You might have thought it would be, I don't know, nuts and seeds or too much saturated fat, but that's much lower. You might have thought it's sugar sweetened beverages. These are much lower down in the list. Look how tiny that contribution is to death and disability from sugar sweetened beverages versus having too much sodium. So I'm not 100% sure why. We know we'll get into it a little bit more, but it could be that the sodium is just a marker for processed foods, which more broadly are unhealthy. Look how important fruit is, though. Fruit is quite high. High honors for fruit. It's a solid bronze medal. Nuts and seeds up there and vegetables down below, but an omega-3 and down the list. Fiber appears on the list as well. So if you want to know, and this is for screenshotting purposes or pausing, and if you're watching the video, this was what they defined as low in fruit, low in vegetable, high in sodium, et cetera. So the idea we're putting forward here today is the idea of food as medicine, using food as medicine. So this is kind of an exotic idea, right? Like this is new agey stuff, but not really. Well, for one thing, it's been used as medicine for thousands of years. You can go back to the ancient Greeks, you can go back to the ancient South Asians and East Asians, and the list goes on and on. But more recently, the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force weighs in and says that intensive behavioral counseling to promote healthier diet and physical activity is a very highly recommended intervention for prevention of cardiovascular disease. If you look at this, the main organization that sets our guidelines around blood pressure control, lifestyle modifications are step one. Same for the American College of Cardiology, American Heart Association guidelines on prevention of cardiovascular disease, lifestyle, healthy lifestyle, is step one. You look at the American Institute of Cancer Research and their guidelines on how to beat cancer, how to prevent cancer in the first place, and if you get it, how to be a cancer survivor for as long as possible, how to not die from cancer. Look at their top 10 guidelines. It's all lifestyle medicine stuff, especially the diet. Be a healthy weight, which is largely a product of your diet, rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans, avoid red and processed meat, avoid fast foods, that's sodium, limit alcohol, and avoid those sugar sweetened beverages. And if you look at the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists and their algorithm for treating type 2 diabetes, this massive problem that our society faces, and what does this highly scientific body recommend? It's lifestyle, number one. Number three, avoid weight gain. In particular, when they talk about nutrition, they call out the plant-based diet. So we are not we are not venturing out into fringe territory when we say food is important. But you think, well, guess what? Food is a very complex topic that nobody studies. There's about 100,000 research articles come out every year in nutrition science. And I'm guessing that most of you haven't read even half that number of those articles this year, maybe even less than half. But even your doctors are not encountering this stuff. So there's a lot of mystery about food. So that's the goal for today. And that's the goal of this website. This is my favorite website, nutritionfacts.org. It is marvelous. So this website is all science. It's driven by this guy who's just a force of nature, Dr. Michael Greger. Most of you are probably familiar with the work of this man. He just shows scientific articles, but somehow manages to make it fascinating. He's got video after video. He's got literally thousands of videos on the website. And so he's filling a niche that should have been filled K through 12. We should have learned this stuff. And often as a primary care doctor, I feel like a first grade educator because I'm teaching people the basics about nutrition, like what is fiber and where is it found and why it would prevent constipation or what have you. Stuff that we really should have studied and we just didn't. And I don't know why, because this is fascinating science and it's every bit as fascinating as rocks and minerals and algebra and you name it. But I digress. So on the topic of how are you going to teach yourself, in addition to plugging into this health challenge, which I'm grateful for you doing, I encourage you to go out and watch some of these documentaries. They're terrific. My personal favorite is this Game Changers. What the Health was a good one. Some of them have a little bit of sensationalistic stuff, as documentaries are wont to do. I really credit the Game Changers for being pretty much bulletproof in that regard. Would love it if folks wanted to share in the chat some of your ideas for documentaries, books that you've read that you really think are valuable, and we will read them at the end. And Alex, you can help me remember to do that. Also, the book, on the topic of books, there's so many books. I listed a few of my favorites, but this is just a tiny list. But How Not to Die and How Not to Diet are both written by that Dr. Michael Greger. And you want a book with thousands and thousands of nutrition references, that's it. And then, of course, signing up for that daily alerts from nutritionfacts.org. So those would be my highlights, ways of teaching yourself. You know, this is an ongoing pursuit. You want to keep learning. So yeah, unfortunately, what a curriculum looks like is we've got a lot of sort of industrial knowledge getting piped into our kids and not so much practical how can I avoid obesity, diabetes, and an early death kind of knowledge. Food 2.0, the idea is we are rethinking the whole concept of food here. And I know for a lot of you, you've rethought it many times over, and it's appropriate to sort of reinvent yourself, rethink things from time to time. So by the way, vitamin B12 would be one of the things I would list for the food that you should eat. It's a supplement. So, and normally it comes in dirt. So you say, why do we need to supplement with B12? Well, the answer is if you were eating dirty food, which, you know, pretty much all our ancestors had some degree of dirt on their food or in their water system, and no antibiotics to wipe stuff out, and no antibacterial soap residue that's coursing through our waterways. So you would have eaten a lot of B12, you know, just from little incidental bits of dirt that we're eating. So 1,000 micrograms a day of B12. Salt, as we reviewed, salt kills. Salt is one of the deadliest things, so beware of salt. It's everywhere. If you eat out, I'm afraid to say you're going to eat a lot of salt. So you've got to get very clever about avoiding the salt. Have the salad and have just balsamic vinegar as your dressing, because sodium appears everywhere. This I know it's a little controversial, and it's partially, we think, because the sodium industry, the salt industry, has kind of set the message a bit. But the evidence is very clear that for every extra, the more sodium you eat, the higher your death rate. We know that sodium impacts blood pressure. We know that that's a big part of it directly. So this is basically a infographic showing you how to check an accurate blood pressure, which I encourage everybody to check. It's cheap and easy. Now, where is the sodium found? How is it getting into our diets? Well, the number one source of sodium for younger kids, people under about age 20, is pizza in our country. And then as we get older, younger adults, it's chicken. Chicken ends up having a lot of sodium added to it. Chicken has been genetically, well, I should say, selectively bred over the years to be higher and higher in saturated fat. And of course, you can't breed it to be all that much high in sodium, so you have to like inject the sodium into it. But it's the fat and the sodium that gets people really enjoying that chicken. Relative to chicken 100 years ago had way more protein than fat, and nowadays it has way more fat than protein in terms of calories. And of course, as we get older, the bread is the main source of sodium. I think overall it's bread is number one. So this is something you could put on your plan, is I'm going to go low sodium. You know, when you do that, you're going to sort of automatically be eating a lot healthier overall. A trick that people recommend is to have the food, a food should have fewer milligrams of sodium than it has calories. So if a food has 200 calories, it should have less than 200 milligrams of sodium. So let's apply that rule to reading this label of an otherwise very healthy food, this can of black beans. What do we see in terms of calories? It's pretty low in calories, 210, but what do we see in sodium? It's like, it's not 210 milligrams of sodium, is it? It's 890, which is pretty whopping. So this is a high sodium food, actually. So I would recommend pour off that sodium water and even rinse the beans and then eat it. And I think you've reduced the sodium content by like 3/4 at that point. What else about food gets us healthy? There's fiber. So fiber is a key element of healthy foods. Fiber correlates with everything good. So the more fiber we eat, the lighter our body weight, the less heart disease, breast cancer, and diabetes we have, the less dementia we have, and the longer we live. So fiber is a marker for everything healthy. We know that fiber directly fuels our microbiota, the healthy gut bacteria. And how does it do that? Well, it turns out, this is a whole nother topic, but the gut bacteria, the bacteria in your gut, they only eat fiber. So when you eat fat, when you eat simple carbohydrates, when you eat like sugars, and when you eat protein, it all tends to get completely digested by the time it gets down to the colon. So it's gone. So if you're eating a standard American diet, your gut bacteria are starving, And it turns out the only carbohydrate around for them to eat is the gut lining, the mucoid gut lining that your body secretes. And you get what's called that leaky gut. And we think that it compromises the immune system and causes inflammation. And so you want to have a healthy microbiome, biota. And the way you do that is you eat a lot of fiber. This is a great book, Fiber Fueled, where he recommends the main principle is diversity of plants, diversity of plants, diversity of plants. So eat as many different kinds of plants as you can. You will thereby eat as many different kinds of fiber, and you will be fueling a diverse set of gut bacteria, and they it's very helpful. It reduces inflammation and causes all sorts of beneficial properties. So a high fiber diet could be your plan. I'm going to eat 50 grams a day, and you'd have to count them. There are tools that help you do that, like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer, and there's others. Let's talk about all these colorful foods. What am I talking about here? Why would I put all these foods together? What do they have in common? They are rich in antioxidants. These are among the most antioxidant rich foods on the planet. Here we have amla, which is maybe number one, and turmeric, which is maybe number two. Very, very rich. So amla is the Indian gooseberry. You can get it as a powder. Turmeric, obviously you can get as a powder. The wonderful yellow spice, what makes yellow mustard yellow, I believe. And then we have the berries, which are sort of high on that list. And of course, the leafy green vegetables. Apple skins turn out to be healthy too. They're rich in polyphenols. So that when they say an apple a day keeps the doctor away, that's part of the reason why. Let's talk about water. Water is critical. Most of us don't drink enough. 2 glasses a day before each meal has been found to help us eat less food and feel more satiated, not be so hungry all the time, and feel better. By the way, some research that looked at what is it about foods that makes us feel full? And what they found is that the water content of food was most predictive of how satiating that food is. So think about more watery, wet foods are going to fill you up more per calorie, and you're just going to eat less calories and be slimmer. Number 2 on that list was fiber, and number 3 was protein. And the more fat a food had was a negative predictor. So the more fat, the more fattening it was per calorie. So here, and it's interesting when you look at the foods that people eat, it's kind of in the opposite direction. What do these foods have in common? They're very dry, except for the sugary cola and beverages, but it's very dry, and all the fiber has been removed. Most of the fiber has been removed. There is protein in a lot of them, not so much the pretzels and the desserts, but there is protein in the meat, no doubt. But other than that, the foods that we eat are just almost engineered to be as unsatiating as possible. So here's a question for you. Which food has the highest satiety index by far among those tested? So satiety index is making you feel full. So which food was the very best at making you feel full? And the answer was boiled potatoes. So I love boiled potatoes. I take a big old 10-pound bag and throw it all in a big pot. I don't have to wash it or anything because you're boiling it. Who needs to wash it if you're going to boil it? And 20 minutes later, you got food for the week that you just add to other stuff. And when you add potatoes to a dish, you know, just boiled potato, you're adding a food that's is plenty filling, has 0 sodium, and carries all sorts of other benefits like the fiber and the other nutrients. This is kind of called out, the benefits of these starchy foods, in this book called The Starch Solution by Dr. John McDougall. Let's shift over to green tea. Why not? You know, green tea turns out to be super healthy. This is a little bit of a strange interlude about green tea, but research showing that green tea is immune boosting, perhaps, reducing the rate at which people got the flu, but dramatically. A lot of this research comes from like Japan, where they drink a lot of green tea. By the way, Japanese green tea has less lead. Unfortunately, China only went unleaded in something like 2009 or thereabouts. And as a consequence, there's a lot of lead contamination in China, sadly. What about gargling? Look at this. So we don't do that. I actually do this every day, is gargle my decaf green tea, because look at that. It reduced the incidence at which these kids got sick at school by 71%. gargling that green tea. So I don't know, this is a wacky interlude on green tea, but hey, we're in the midst of a ongoing, never-ending pandemic. Why not focus on that kind of thing? By the way, it's apparently a more effective mouthwash than chlorhexidine or these nasty chemicals that are over that you buy over the counter. No plastic waste, no nasty chemicals that you're putting into your body, no alcohol, which we know causes oral cancers. Just try the green tea route. I would go decaf because you don't want to caffeinate yourself right before bed. So here's my ultimate mouthwash and gargle is mixing a little amla powder with your green tea. There's actually research on that in this video on nutritionfacts.org. What's the best mouthwash? Fascinating stuff. There's actually research on this. Who knew? You didn't know. I didn't know. Dr. Greger knew when he read the research, but we don't know this stuff because we're not reading 99,000 research articles every year. Calorie density. Now, this is a vitally important topic because calorie density, this is really about the weight gain concept. So the more, as you look at the animal products and the more processed foods, they're more dense in calories. So bite for bite, they are going to pack a lot more calories. So when you fill that stomach up, and we tend to fill our stomach up like 3 to 4 times a day, on average, we humans, when you're filling it with these calorie dense foods, the cheese stick, the pizza, the hot dogs, you're going to get fatter. So no surprise, people who routinely eat whole food plant-based, they tend to be very skinny because they're eating stuff like these carrots in large amounts. And I love my sweet potatoes. Here's a good book that goes into this concept quite nicely. Chef AJ's The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss. She says, eat to the left of the red line, because it's the same message as what I just presented. Interesting that you look at foods like whole grains, and which are nice and pretty low calorie, but you refine them by making them into bread, which has almost triple the calorie density. It goes from about 500 to about 1,400 calories per pound, or so about triple the calories per mouthful when you're eating those whole grains in the form of bread. So let's talk about whole grains briefly. We don't really do whole grains right in our country. Everything we eat tends to be highly refined. Most of the grains we eat is like refined flour, and it's almost always wheat, but there's a whole host of different kinds of grains. And grains are our chief source of insoluble fiber, which really seems to reduce colon cancer rates and possibly a whole host of other benefits. And if you're not eating intact whole grains, you're not eating much insoluble fiber. There's so many cool grains that you got to eat in the intact form to get the full benefit. So if you look at oats, for example, it starts as a groat. And when you process it a little bit, it becomes a steel cut oat. If you roll it, it becomes a rolled oat. If you roll it and then chop it, it becomes like an instant oat. And then you can, of course, grind it into a flour. But the nutritional benefits of the intact whole oat groat is far better. You have less insulin release. You have a lower glycemic index. You retain way more of that cancer-fighting fiber. Your microbiota is much happier because there's more food for them. So you want to eat ideally. So even oats, even when we're eating whole grain, we're not eating the intact whole grain, because oatmeal, as people eat it, is either rolled or steel cut. You can cook up these groats quite nicely, and they're chewy and nice. It takes a little getting used to, but it's sort of the more natural form of the food. Let's talk about omega-3. These are our best plant-based sources. Flax is really a food that's so super that you want to eat it every day. You got to grind it to get the full benefit. So that flax meal, you can put it in a coffee grinder. This is a food I recommend you incorporate into your diet every day. It's so rich in omega-3. It's rich in lignans, which seem to prevent certain kinds of cancer, and it's rich in fiber. Walnuts are the most anti-cancer nut. According to some research, they're also rich in omega-3, a wonderful food, well worth incorporating in your daily diet. Nuts are high in calorie density, but when you look at the weight gain, bottom line weight gain among people eating nuts, it tends to be they don't tend to cause obesity. You see somebody walking around who's got a big belly, it's not usually from nuts. We had our hand raised. You're welcome to unmute and ask your question if you like. While we're doing that, while we're waiting, chia, or you could type it in the chat. Chia is another good source of omega-3 fiber and lignans, but not nearly as good as flax, but it's another kind of fiber. You want diversity of plants. It's low cost. It can be a great addition to your diet because it's kind of fun and pleasant to eat. But anyway, so you could add this to your weekly plan: ground flaxseed daily. How much? They say 2, 3, 4 tables. Well, I should say 1 to 2 tablespoons would be a fairly typical amount. Dr. Greger, by the way, has his daily dozen where he lists the sort of the dozen foods he recommends you eat every day. Flax seeds is on that list, actually, as are most of these other things we're talking about: the spices, the whole grains, leafy greens are ever so important. And he has a free app that kind of helps you even quantitate it. He recommends this number of servings of beans, 3 servings of beans, and he recommends 1 serving a day of cruciferous vegetables, the broccoli in particular. So I feel free to download that free app. It's called the Daily Dozen. So your week 2 plan could be to use that Daily Dozen app and try to use it every day for the week and see what happens. You probably find yourself eating a whole lot of super healthy stuff. Dark green leafy vegetables are arguably our healthiest food on the planet. So rich in antioxidants and so rich in lutein, which is the most important antioxidant for the brain and for preventing Alzheimer's disease, to name just one of many, many, many benefits. They're a great source of calcium. You know, nowadays you have, miraculously, you have these low-cost, large containers that you can buy for about $5, the spring mix. So try to shoot for the darker greens, not the iceberg lettuce kind of thing. These are kind of top 2 among anti-cancer foods. You know, the broccoli, the cruciferous vegetables. Of the cruciferous vegetables, the very best one, it happens to be probably broccoli. And then of the bulbs, the allium family, the very best one appears to be garlic. But onions are wonderful too, and try to incorporate these into your daily diet. When you talk about salad dressing, I recommend herbs. I recommend balsamic vinegar. Vinegar, it turns out to have wonderful nutritional and health-giving properties. It helps reduce insulin resistance, and it helps with weight loss as well. Nutritional yeast, one of my favorite things. This is one way to get your yeast. Extra virgin olive oil or not? Well, this is a new slide because there is some new science. The main knock against olive oil is it's an oil. It's a highly processed food. It's very, very calorie dense. And there is some evidence that it injures the endothelium, the lining of our blood vessels, and promotes that hardening of the arteries. But according to some recent research, this Cordioprev group is finding actually possibly improving endothelial function. It's not any old olive oil, it's extra virgin. So anyway, stay tuned, but there is some evidence and some thinking that extra virgin olive oil may actually be vascular friendly. I think if you have advanced heart disease, it might be best to avoid until we have more definitive evidence. But if you're not, small amounts of extra virgin olive oil is the go-to oil I would recommend. And this one found that it actually had reduced artery clogging. This is a very recent study from this August, but the Mediterranean diet decreased the clogging at 5 years and maintained it at 7 years. So there seemed to be longer term benefits. I'll take the questions in a minute. I'm trying to finish up here in the next couple of minutes. So your number 1 snack food is fruit. So think in terms of fruit. I know you're not going to go craving an apple after dinner. You want dessert, but oh my gosh, it works. Like try this at home. Eat an apple after dinner. It reduces some of those cravings for dessert, I find. And now at this time of year, oh my gosh, the apples are marvelous here in the autumn in the mid-Atlantic. So another plan you can go for is 8 or more fruits a day. So it could be argued that we are frugivores. And I think we'll cover this more next week, but we are fruit eater. We are natural fruit eaters, just like our great ape cousins. And there is some evidence that eating about 8 or more a day has some special benefits and even uplifting your food. We talked about the time restricted eating. Stop eating after 7. There's so many benefits. The science is very compelling. So that you could definitely put that on your plan. So here's sort of the new food pyramid of all the things that we emphasize. But when you're eating these kinds of foods, you're getting so many of these benefits. You're getting the antioxidants, you're getting alkaline foods, you're getting anti-inflammatory foods, you're getting high fiber, you're getting good digestion. You are getting all the fringe benefits, the anti-cancer from the broccolis and from the dark green leafies. Reminder that we have our private social network. We had some good questions in the survey that people filled out, and this is a great place to post your questions. We will answer your questions, so feel free to please come join this group. And here's the link to it. And maybe Alex, you could paste it in there again, or somebody could paste it in the chat. health-challenge-de.mn.co. And that will get you to our private social network. Great place to ask your questions. So week 2, last week I gave sort of a recommendation of what I would recommend you do. And I would recommend this for week 2. It's very similar to week 1, except I suggest just go whole hog on the plant-based. You're going to see the biggest benefits if you really try it out, and you've already kind of put your toe in the water by eating a meal a day. So why not go 100% whole hog? Now, how to do that?
You mean whole potato?
Yeah, I mean, apologies. You got to watch out. Our expressions are replete with animal exploitation, killing birds, and the list goes on and on in terms of how a chicken with a head cut off. The list goes on and on. Very graphical, very animal violent related. So apologies for that. So here we are. We have our instant overnight oats. Is a great choice for breakfast. I like to make my multi-grain. I call it breakfast grains. I make it in the Instant Pot, but there's so many things you can do. As far as lunch, and I don't know when you're going to eat your salad, but usually it's either lunch or dinner. I recommend eating a big salad. Now you'll be hungry after this because you haven't eaten much starch, so you probably want to couple it with some kind of semi-starchy food. You could have a couple sliced boiled potatoes and pour just a little bit of chili over top of it to get you through the lunch period. With eating a whole lot of food, it takes a while, so that's a downside to eating a large salad like that. By the way, shout out to the broccoli sprouts. This is a very, very rich source of broccoli. Each little mouthful of broccoli sprouts is like eating an entire head of broccoli in terms of its cancer fighting. And by the way, again, a big emphasis on big salads. When you eat that big salad, you're going to find days you eat your big salad, you don't gain as much weight. You lose a little more weight. Beans, it's what's for dinner. There's so many great meals. Remember, Google is the best cookbook ever written. And you just go on there and Google what you want. You want to make this dish, you can find something very much like it. Yummy plant-based quinoa patties, and you'll find 100 recipes and just pick one. So the food's amazing. You are not suffering when you're eating plant-based. The food is amazing. Now, these are more intricate recipes and they take a while. So again, I like to keep things more simple. We don't have time to show this video about beans and how they have this fascinating second meal effect. But bottom line is you eat beans in one meal, and then the next meal later, you have less hunger and you have a lower sugar spike in response to your next meal, even if you eat the same food. So eating beans for one meal, apologies, we just don't have time for it, but it will, I'll include a link to it in the subsequent follow-up. The second meal effect is powerful stuff. So a cup of beans a day is a great strategy. So I'm done with the lecture part, and we're supposed to finish up in about 3 minutes. But if you haven't done our survey for this, I call it the week 2 survey, but it's about how did week 1 go. Please go to this tinyurl.com/healde, HEALDE-progress, and fill out that survey. I really do value the feedback. We want to make this a valuable experience. Also, I'm trying to learn what kind of behaviors that you guys are doing is really working. So whether it's the dietary, whether it's the sleep. So let me we have like 2 minutes. So until we're supposed to break. So fill out this survey if you could. And while we're filling out the survey, what questions, Len's got his hand up. Len, would you care to ask your question here? Unmute yourself. And or if there's Len, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question, or Alex, you're welcome to read out a question or two if you see something in the chat worth mentioning.
Yeah,
Len?
so we have Ruben. He's questioning research on benefits of the EVOO. Who sponsored the research? Maybe the OO industry contrasts with Dr. Esselstein's golden standard research.
Yeah, and Esselstyn, lots of credit to Esselstyn. So again, it's an area of some controversy. I'll say that you have the likes of Dr. Walter Longo and his longevity diet, recommending people consume extra virgin olive oil. He says, Esselstyn's work was wonderful, but science has continued to amass more evidence. And in his opinion, the evidence favors some degree of extra virgin olive oil. I think he recommended 70 grams a day, which is a fairly large amount. I'm not necessarily recommending it, but I think I think for those of us who aren't facing, real serious cardiovascular disease, I think you're probably not going to harm yourself by using a little extra virgin olive oil, especially if it really helps you otherwise adhere to a plant-based diet.